Hello, hello. Good morning. Thank you for everyone who is on right now. We want to welcome you to the Terminal AMA with Woody Anderson and Dylan Sirota. We're going to give people a few minutes to settle in and get situated. So we will go live in about 1 or 2 minutes. So again, thank you for being on time, and we will get started here shortly. Thank you. Good morning, or good afternoon from wherever you're calling. We want to welcome you to episode 7 of Terminal's AMA series, where we encourage you to connect with the industry's brightest minds from some of the most innovative companies, getting their thoughts on the ever-changing tech landscape and all things related to the future of work. We're thrilled to welcome today's featured guests, Chief Technical Officer at Zumper and Distinguished Remote Teams Leader at the largest rental marketplace for renters, landlords, and multifamily properties in North America. We have Woody Anderson here today. He'll be joined in conversation with Terminal's co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer, Dylan Sirota. I'll let Dylan introduce himself and Woody further in just a bit, but before that, a quick reminder on a few housekeeping items. All AMAs are live streamed on YouTube, and the recording will be available to view at the conclusion of today's discussion. As part of the registration for today's event, a number of you submitted questions that Woody will be sure to get to. But if you have additional questions over the course of the conversation, please type them into the QA function and we'll get to as many as we can. With that said, there's a lot to get to, so I'll pass it over to Dylan, who will introduce himself and our special guest for today. Take it away, Dylan.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to Terminal's AMA number 7 with our special guest today, Woody Anderson. I'm Dylan Sirota, co-founder and chief strategy officer at Terminal. For those unfamiliar with what Terminal does, we are a remote teams partner. So we partner with and we help some of the fastest growing companies build, operate, and scale their engineering teams across North America. Now today, I am thrilled to be joined by Woody. I've been a big fan of Zumper and a big fan of his over a long period of time. I think he brings some unique insights and thoughts around managing remote teams, limiting churn, and why he prioritizes hiring outside the Bay Area. Before we get into that though, Woody, I'd love to turn it over to you. You're a CTO. I'm always fascinated to understand the journey that one takes to become a CTO in that leadership position. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe take our audience a little bit through your background, specifically, I think highlighting some of the experiences that you've had around managing remote teams.
Sure thing. So yeah, I mean, I think I'll try to give you guys a bit of a lightning round cover. I graduated in 2001, right in the dot-com bubble burst. And that definitely shaped a bit of who I am. I think I joined a startup right out of school. We were doing telecom. We had remote sales engineering, and in the UK, we had 2 or 3 different UK offices. And I kind of began as an engineer, and I left there really as a tech lead, and I kind of grew a lot technically and leadership wise there, and I interfaced with the remote teams there quite a bit. After I left there, I joined a big company, just as that was Fox Interactive, just as Facebook put the real screws to destroying MySpace. So another interesting change in churn. Then I kind of moved back into startups again and moved up to San Francisco Bay Area, doing a small startup with a small team, doing big technical stuff. It was amazing. Right through 2009, the next big financial crisis. And that sort of prompted us to exit to Yahoo and, I guess, take certainty, I guess, in our situation. And that was, there I learned a lot. It's one of maybe the most formative times in my career in terms of cementing what it meant to be a leader. And a lot of that was by example. And the leadership team at that company are still lifelong mentors for me. My time at Yahoo, I had an amazing time at Yahoo, actually. But I also got a lot of experience in remote work. I myself was work from home 2, then 3, then 4 days a week, sometimes 5. I worked with a science team who was in Israel with a 10-hour offset. I worked with the ops team in Bangalore with a 12.5-hour offset. Those were difficult things to deal with, especially if they were on the same day. I would say career-wise, hilariously, my biggest missed opportunity. I think if you're going to spend significant time at a really big company, one of the things you got to do if you want to be a leader and a CTO is you got to network like crazy and build your bench. And that's something I still look back on as mostly missed opportunity during my time there. And then I transitioned to Zumper, and I just wanted to, ship code every day. I wanted to have a small, tight team, and I wanted to, impact the user. Again, like, my customer, I want to make impact on them every day. I started as an engineer. By this time in my career, I wasn't as worried about what my title was and how I was perceived. I just was like, hey, I'm an engineer. I want to join the team and do things. It helped that there were only 4 people, so I was going to, built in, I was going to get to have a really big impact. I took over the engineering team in a couple of years, and in a couple of years after that, I moved into the CTO role. Didn't really know what that would be. That was my first time being CTO. I didn't know if it would be different than director of engineering. Turns out it totally is. And then I think just like anyone maybe struggled with what does it mean to be CTO and what kind of CTO am I, and is it the right kind? And I guess I lived in that headspace for a while and eventually left that headspace and was just kind of like, I know, it doesn't matter. I am who I am. And, I would say I categorize myself as very hands-on, very technical. I still code a lot. I code more than most of my peers that are in the role. I spend my time really at the high level strategy and at the low level code reviews and one-on-ones with engineers. And those are the 2 places where I feel like my big impact is, and that's where I focus. I think part of a lot of the different moments I highlighted, maybe the macroeconomic trends. I have a built-in realism and pragmatism that comes from graduating in a crash and changing jobs and trying to be successful in the startup world during a number of financial crises. So I don't really focus on the fluff and the narratives. I just, I take what works for me, and then I just double down on that a lot.
Well, it's interesting what you said just around the pivotal points in your career happening kind of around these big macro changing moments. And that's actually a topic I want to get to now. It's been interesting over the last few weeks. We've seen this massive acceleration towards the adoption of remote work. And a lot of that has just been through the requirement of shelter in place. Many companies we've seen have also jumped on that train, kind of claiming that the office is now optional, so far as hearing that the office is now dead. So I'm curious, you have teams in San Francisco and in other areas of the United States. What's your take on that? How do you prefer to set up your teams? And is the office really dead at this point?
Yeah, well, I guess there's sort of 2 parts of that. There's like my preferences, and then there's the reality of the moment in the context, because they're clearly not aligned at all. But basically my preference is really to have everyone together, face to face and collaborating. I mean, I think I built a lot of the culture that I'm super proud of, and I benefit from, or my team and my company benefits from, in that model. I prefer hubs. I think, at some point it became, in 2018-19, the talent crunch in San Francisco became so ludicrous that we just basically stopped looking for talent in San Francisco from an engineering perspective. And the compromise middle ground for me that I think really worked out for us, and I continue to believe in, is really a hub model where you have groups of engineers and product and design and whatever else you think you can build for your business in hubs, and you get still the benefits of the collaboration. You get some benefits of picking up talent at a better price point and a better alignment with what your company is all about. For me, a lot of that is like zero entitlement, and I was having a hard time finding zero entitlement engineers in San Francisco. I think full remote and whether the office is dead is a I would have told you no way with a lot of expletives in a non-COVID world. In a COVID world, I think it's harder to understand. It completely changes the dynamic of what does it mean to have an office, a hub, and be remote. And I guess I'm not confident in my predictions there. I won't be happy if we're 100% remote. That doesn't mean I won't learn to get really, really good at it, but I'll be dragged into that kicking and screaming. Like I want to have the ability to supplement flexible working arrangements with in-person behavior and in-person reinforcement and group dynamic and camaraderie that comes from being able to, go to a social event together with low friction. Obviously, I can't.
That makes a lot of sense.
COVID is COVID,
And and one thing you said there, just as you think about hubs, as I understand, your team is largely based in San Francisco, and Zumper has grown immensely. I think you recently announced a $60 million round, but you also did acquire a team and build a hub in Providence, Rhode Island. And I'm curious just about that experience. How was that integrating the team? Why did you originally go after that opportunity? And if you did it again, what would you do differently? What were your learnings?
Yeah, lots there to answer, I guess. Super glad we did it. I mean, it was a great addition. The team is great. I was kind of tasked with by leadership and my peers to find a solution to the how are we going to grow problem of the talent market of San Francisco, and we were exploring all manner of ways to grow. Outsourcing, offshore, like things that I loathe. Not that they're wrong for other people, but they were just things that for me stuck in my craw as challenges I didn't want to take on. And so we were just kind of exploring all the ways that I might, decide to grow the team. And this team kind of reached out to us and was like, "Hey, we work in real estate tech. Like, we're having a tough time. Are you interested in acquiring us?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And so essentially, I'm super lucky. But at the same time, it was a bunch of work to onboard them, and they're a small team, 4 people. I spent a bunch of time figuring out what I would need to do to add a team that was remote, what people had done in the past. I've been acquired as a company by a big company and felt the sting of failures of how to do that. So I was particularly cognizant of what I wanted to not do. I think it was easier for me to know what I needed to not do than it was to know what to do. And we'll cover what I would do differently as a result of doing it once. But basically, yeah, we started them with like a really big integrated project, and I think that was really successful. Where rather than treating them as a remote team on their own project, we started with, we're all going to be on one big team, and you're going to be deeply, deeply integrated with the engineers in San Francisco. You're going to get involved in the debates, the technical solutions. We made sure to really listen to their ideas so that it wasn't just like, hey, you're added to us. It was like, and you're going to adopt our practices and our languages and frameworks. Like they drove the adoption of TypeScript. We adopted some of their development patterns, and not just because they were theirs, but more because like we adopt good ideas and they had good ideas. And I also felt it was really important that would help us build partnership, and that they'd be a real part they would be the team instead of a part of my team. And that was pretty successful. We made sure to switch out of that mode so that they could have a tactical alignment and, project specificity and get a lot of that benefit of being a hub again. One of the other things to do to make sure that they didn't feel like a second class, which is I think a thing that if you're going to acquire any kind of company or grow a remote team, you definitely just have to make sure that they're not feeling like, oh, they're not HQ. And don't kid yourself. They know they're not HQ if you have an HQ. But do what you can do to give them something that's special. They had for a while a nicer office than we did. And it wasn't until we moved into a new office that we got even close to parity. Theirs was a ground up brand new building, amazing amenities. When we're doing company outings here, we're made sure to set them up with budget and really prod and push them to make sure that they're also doing company outings as a team. And, we just made sure that they weren't not doing the things that we think were successful for us. We made sure that they were doing their version of it, but we also gave them the freedom to be a little different and practice it their own way. And that was useful. What I would do, I think, massively differently, if you will.
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So I would just communicate a lot more and a lot more clearly. I think, I like to be relaxed. It's a counterpoint my zero chill attitude in other areas. I like to kind of, give people a lot of latitude, a lot of freedom to figure things out for themselves. And I don't like to repeat myself. Boy, getting over that is important when you're got a remote team. In particular, you have to just say what you want and how you want them to behave over and over and over again. One, so that it sinks in. Two, they hear you and remember it. And three, they believe you. I guess I would also hold myself to a higher standard on the clarity part. It took us a while for them to even reach out and say like, hey, we want to kind of change some of these practices. Like, is that okay? And I was like, yes, obviously that's your job. Tell me what to change. Tell me how to run your area better. And I realized like I hadn't clarified that like responsibility line well enough and often enough. And those are some learnings, that I could do a much better job doing it a second time with any team, is like really give them a clear sense of like what self-determination, responsibilities, and capabilities I expect from them and want them to sort of embrace, if you will.
No, that's fantastic. Appreciate your insights on that. I know many companies come to us and want to expand, have questions around the challenges of integrating. And I think one thing just to highlight that you said around kind of creating more of an inclusive development cycle early on. So actually integrating that team into the development cycle at HQ as a way of learning, building those bonds across the team before you actually make it non-inclusive and give them their own charter. So I think that's a really great takeaway from that experience, along with everything else. I want to transition to another topic that we've chatted about before that I think is interesting and timely and something that comes up often, which is in terms of hiring engineers. One thing that you've said to me before is that top talent means nothing, and it's all about finding the right talent. I couldn't agree more with you about this, and I'd love for you to maybe explain to the audience a little bit more about what you mean and maybe what you see some companies getting wrong by always aspiring to hire the best talent or the top talent.
Yeah. So the phrase itself is meaningless, and probably more than meaningless, it's counterproductive in my opinion. It just leads people to not talk about the same thing, and it leads people to be imprecise and imprecision when you're thinking about who you're hiring and who you're looking for is a recipe for disappointment and maybe even disaster. I think for us, I know what I'm trying to build, and that's important. And I'm trying to build a product and customer centric team, right down to the engineer and right down to DevOps. And I'm looking for impact over excellence, if you will. And I don't mean to say that I don't care about excellence. I deeply do, and my team would laugh just to hear me say it sometimes. But I can develop excellence and real intrinsic motivation and customer empathy. Those are harder to find, in my opinion, in my experience. And so they give you and your team resilience and the ability to build other skills more so than technical excellence does. And so when I'm defining top talent, it's not who can write the best code. I don't actually use the top talent word at all or phrase. I just look for, hey, I'm looking for, product, customer, passionate engineers who are self-aware and intrinsically motivated, because so much can be built by that person and with the team that they join. Lastly, I guess I'll say, there's the brass tacks of being a leader and running an org, and budget is not something you can just ignore, and top talent often goes right along with this conversation of like, how much more would you pay for top talent? And I think you need to know what you're trying to solve, and if what you're trying to solve is going to line up with the kind of engineer you're going to hire to do it, and whether they're going to be fulfilled and motivated to work on that all the time. Is it an opportunity to them to solve your problems, or is it like a frustrating burden? And, just be honest about what you're doing. If you're doing something that might be a frustrating burden to someone, but they're amazing, like, they're not your engineer. Like, you want to get the engineer who's just going to pour their heart and soul into that problem and learn and develop, and they'll be an amazing technical person on the other side of it if you're good at your job. But you'll get the team you want out of that behavior, not someone who's kind of like just doing it for the paycheck. It is my belief system, I guess.
A little follow up on that. I'm just curious, as you look to interview engineers, have you found anything in particular that does help you kind of cut through maybe just some of the blocking and tackling around code generation and really deeply understand the intrinsic motivation and fit? Is there anything that you've found over the years, a certain type of question or exercise that has helped you get that level of insight and conviction?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, we have a specific interview we do process, and it's highly collaborative. We solve real world problems. We align our interview process to show someone what it would be like to work here, and for us to see what it would be like to work with that person. We don't do a lot of whiteboard. We don't do a lot of puzzle solving. We do a little whiteboard, but really just to solve the technical problem of the question. We might parse an XML feed, stand up a REST API. Like, don't use any frameworks. Like, do you know how to make the basics of it work? And then you know how to solve this technical problem that spans 3 or 4 different high level architectural systems and asynchronicity and performance. And we just talk through, and you'll see someone try and debug a problem. You'll see someone try to use Google, and you'll see someone fail. And some people will ask for help, and some people will stare silently at a screen and feel judged. And we try to unblock both of those by being who we are, which is like helpful collaborators. And when you find someone who will respond to that, they break out of being silent, and then all of a sudden it's engaged. That's awesome. If you find someone who's kind of resistant to being helped, that's going to tell you a lot about what it would be like to have them on your team. And then I do some, probing into what I think is like what makes you angry as a person, if you will, like, or what drives your frustrations. And I don't get a lot of value out of what makes someone happy. I think that like you get a lot of hilarious answers that are Hallmark cards. But if you can get someone to tell you what just gets their goat, then that'll tell you maybe a lot about like, who they are, and whether or not like you want to put that person just right in front of every problem you've got. Just be like, there is your problem. Just like get to it, man. And whoever they are, like if their problem is your problem, that's what you want. Awesome. So I guess that's kind of my framework. I mean, I think it's also really aligned with our cultural values as a company and as a team, and that's a specific thing that's important to add that we didn't have in the very beginning when we were looking for talent. Was really just we had an idea of like, oh yeah, we kind of like this person's vibe and we think they're really good technically, but I think we developed over time a really good way to figure out like different parts of the interview where we're really looking for how receptive to you are you to feedback and course correction, and how do you handle failing a bit, because our our interview has failed, or sorry, rather designed for you to fail a little somewhere in there, just because it kind of just can scale. I mean, I'd fail little parts of it if I did it today. And I think that's a good thing. You just want to see how people handle that stuff, because that's what happens in the job. And how do they deal with a variety of different interviewers and styles?
Super helpful. I've never heard the kind of digging into, I think, what gets people angry, but I think that's obviously a good side to understand, because startups are challenging. There's going to be things that are frustrating, and know what you're getting into when you're going into some situation like that. I want to transition to the last question I have, and we'll incorporate a few things from some of the questions that the audience has asked. But one of the things that just blew my mind when I first learned about this is, in today's world of the real lack of supply of technical talent in a market like the Bay Area, you went 2 years without any regrettable churn on your team, which, first of all, you should get a gold medal of some kind for that achievement. But really, I've never heard of that. Most tenures at technology companies today, between 12 and 18 months on the technical side. How'd you do it? Maybe can you share a little bit of insight of what you think had made your culture unique, or the team that you built so glued and stuck on the problems that you're solving? Would love to hear briefly around what you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get into this in the amount of time, but I'll just briefly say, one, you have to value the hell out of it. I mean, it's more valuable than any book or person, me included, is going to be able to articulate for you. It makes everything about your job easier, and it's really worth every bit of legitimate investment you can put in the root of growing retention. And I mean the root of retention, not placation and spend or something. So when you're thinking about what to prioritize with your other executives, don't overlook making systemic investments in the things that you believe are going to lead to better retention, because they'll pay for themselves. And if you need help figuring out how to do that, and engage your CFO and they'll help you, because there's a cost associated with every loss and turn. I'd say, what are the things that maybe I did or we did as a team? I'll cover that a little bit. So one, the root of all retention, in my opinion, is like integrity and leadership, but that's kind of an intangible thing to talk about in 15 minutes. So some more tangible aspects are, be lucky, and that's the number one thing I'll say. I think deferentially, I'll say I think I was really lucky, but I think you have to be capable and ready to take advantage of luck. The luck favors the prepared. We hired people really early, ended up being great. Long before we had a good process, we backfilled with good processes, and we elevated those people, and that was luck, but prepared luck. Develop a management team. I developed a management team that doesn't need me. Now that took a lot of work. How I did that, in my retrospective opinion, I doubled down on my strengths, and I really believe in doubling down on your strengths, building on them, expanding them, and instilling them in your team. As far as my weaknesses, the flip side of that coin, rather than really trying to develop myself, I found people who would complement my weaknesses and utilize my team to help deal with the fact that I wasn't, perfect at everything. And that involves delegation and gives them lots of opportunities. And I think that it's just basically faster than personal growth. Although I think you need to backfill with your own personal growth, of course. Certainly I do, but someone else who's good at something is going to be good at it faster than me becoming good at it. And then, there's this, we adapted as we grew, and we adapted methodically. We walk a tightrope between the value of momentum and the value of being able to pick up a shiny new win, or to change course in order to avoid the loss of work. Both are very important, and there's no simple way to explain that one, but you should be paying attention to it for sure at all times. If you thrash your roadmap, you're going to thrash your team. And if you're going to be able to turn on a dime and do something amazing and new because the opportunity's there, celebrate the hell out of the ability that you have that skill, and use it like an ace in the hole sparingly, and give it all the pomp and circumstance and celebration it deserves, because you are changing what people are working on. and that tends to make my team grumpy, if you will. And I think, learning and growing, specifically, I think a lot of people think about learning as how to learn the thing that they know they need to learn. And I think that that's good. But I place a lot more value in learning what you don't know that you don't know. And it's a well-known topic, but it's maybe harder to practice than it is to say. And you have to be really dedicated to it, coaching for yourself, coaching for your team, from yourself, from others, peers of yours that can be a different point of view for your team, actual leadership coaches. If you're at all passive about learning, then you should do something else.
That's awesome, and thank you for sharing that insight, and congratulations. It's quite a remarkable goal to have that you accomplished in the Valley. I want to move quickly. I know we're at time, but there's a couple questions. If you could just briefly maybe touch on a few that were submitted from the audience. I think the first is something that I'm super curious about, which is, do you have any different approach for managing junior employees remotely, maybe than you do for senior folks?
Yeah, I would say this is nascent for us, given where we are, in the truly remote at this point. So I'll kind of talk about a little bit like how we've approached it, but I don't have a lot of track record of knowing that this is, going to be as successful as I hope it will be. Really the socialization and the learning, to meet the team, junior folks come with less confidence typically, and they need to know more, and they can't learn while they're building a really big complicated thing how the whole system fits together as easily. They just don't have the experience and the intuition to fit all the pieces together. So we're starting our junior folks with bigger projects to drive like understanding, documentation, going and interviewing other teams and synthesizing the points of view of how the systems work. It drives them meeting people and learning, who everyone is and what they're kind of responsible for. And then it gives them and their manager a bunch of ready-made topics for explanation and learning, either what's important to that team or really how does the system work, or why does the system work this way? All those things come really quickly out of like, hey, we're going to give you some like documentation type tasks. And then I think, the thing with a junior employee is just being always available to unblock them. And that's the thing we've all struggled with in the like remote world. And, I have office hours every day for the first half of the day, like just 9:30 a.m. to noon. That's office hours for me. But I think, getting someone to attend your office hours is different than holding them. And, with our junior folks, we're looking at more like, maybe doing we've experimented with it. We're probably going to do more where it's just you're in a Zoom constantly in a Zoom with your manager or your buddy. That is like the equivalent of being able to swivel your chair around and ask a question, and that it's a little bit less optional. Not like reach out to me when you have a question, or every 15 minutes I'm going to ask you a question, but just we're going to be in a video conference just on the side all the time. So we're just always connected and talking through your problems. And that would continue until it became really no longer productive. But in the beginning, it's super productive to have that live pulse with someone who's junior and doesn't know the ropes yet, doesn't know where things are, and is developing the skill of learning how and when to ask questions, which is a tremendously important skill for development in juniors. And that's our approach, I guess, to that question.
Yeah. No, that's great. Last question, and I will let you go. Where do you turn to develop as a leader? Are there books, mentors? As a CTO, a lot of people would look at your role and say, look, you've kind of eclipsed the top. What motivates you to continue to develop?
Yeah, so I mean, I have mentors, multiple, and they're really valuable for commiseration at times, but they're really valuable when you have a specific goal or a specific area you feel like you're failing at, or you see a really big opportunity to take on. Peers are great, industry panels, listen to other leaders talk, hearing what you see resonates with your own situation. Honestly, the biggest driver for me of learning is failure. So since I'm highly motivated to keep learning, I am highly motivated to keep failing. And I just take on responsibilities that scare me and make me feel uncomfortable, and I'm sort of like can't help but learn. And yeah, that's kind of driven by, for me, like sucking at something is a deeply powerful motivator for me personally. So I go out of my way to pick something new to suck at, and that solves the how do I learn, and I'll just at that point I'll just find a way.
That's awesome. And I think that is a great place to wrap up. I'm going to find something I suck at and be highly motivated today to hopefully tackle it. But thank you so much, Woody. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. And I think your insights have been super interesting, and we're excited to share it once this gets released. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We hope to have you join us for our next AMA. Thanks again, Woody.
Yeah, great. Thanks to be here.